Good morning, kids. Today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcar Studios. His final episode in the author's reboot of rebooting American Dragon, Jake Long, with a brand new story. Let's hop in and hear this new story.
In today's episode, I'm
There we
redesigning
go.
in my art style some of the characters from the classic Disney show American Dragon Jake Long,
Love
which
it.
I was astounded to realize only ran for 2 seasons because I definitely remember it going longer than that. But anyway,
Only
along with
2
redesigning
seasons.
the characters, I'm also rebooting the story, making some changes and rewriting it in my own way with some twists and turns that keep it true to the original concept, while reframing the whole thing in a way that resonated with me. Similar to what I've done the last couple weeks with Foster's Home for Magic.
Now I wonder, is he going with the European style of dragon or the Asian style of dragon? Both are good, but the European style, because that's season 1, is better.
Friends and Danny
In my
Phantom.
opinion.
And as this artist reboot series is still something I'm trying to get off the ground, seeing if I can get YouTube to push it out a little bit more, it's super helpful if you're new here to subscribe or to share the episode, like the episode, comment, all those engagement things, but specifically giving me ideas for what
comment,
other
and
shows
subscribe
or
for more.
games or whatever you'd like to see rebooted. I still have an idea I really like for Kim Possible. A bunch of people have asked for Ben 10, Code
Yes.
Kids Next Door,
Yes.
Gravity Falls, Owl
Maybe.
House. I definitely
Yeah.
like the idea of trying all those and more, but it'll be easier to commit to doing more of these if this series picks up and gets a little bit more traction. But
Yes,
anyway,
let's
this intro's
pop.
been rambly enough, so let's get on to what today's episode's actually supposed to be about.
Let's go.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like it, but either way, enjoy the show. When you imagine a legendary
Here we go.
defender of the innocent, odds are you think of someone stoic, bold, and wise. Not likely a breakdancing high school skate punk who refers to himself as the Mac Daddy Dragon of the NYC. But only a few years after gaining his ancestral dragon powers, Jake Long would quickly prove himself to be one of the most important figures in the recent history of mythics. Mythics are the term for the community of so-called mythical creatures that live in hiding in our world, many living amongst us in disguise. The most revered among them are the dragons, beings with both dragon and human forms who can change between them at will. They have immense powers and are tasked with protecting other mythics from threats.
Very strong.
And in the modern day, one of the most common threats you'd hear mythics talking about are the huntsmen. Although you'd be hard-pressed to catch Jake himself bad-mouthing this group. You see, the huntsman had been created by a group of humans who knew about mythics
Looks like the dragon style he went with is more of a European body style. Well, big and bulky. I mean, strong.
and felt their own people needed protection from them. When they'd started out, they were simply hunting mythics that actually attacked humans, which, at the time, even mythics had considered perfectly reasonable. But as time went on, a rift grew between the huntsmen and the mythics, as the huntsman clan got bigger and some started killing mythics for less and less justified reasons.
Before it's
Eventually,
meant
some
hunting.
mythics even started hunting down huntsmen, and the hatred between the two groups grew more and more intense every day.
There we go.
But Jake never accepted this. Despite his cocky, carefree demeanor, he had a surprisingly mature take on the divide between the groups, fueled by his grandpa's teachings. Jake's gramps was also a dragon and was his teacher. He'd always said that the loudest voices in any argument are often the most hateful and closed-minded, which is why it becomes so easy to label everyone who disagrees with us as hateful and closed-minded as well, as if the loudest voices in the group speak for the whole, which often they don't. If you spend the time actually trying to understand those you disagree with, often you'll find you have far more in common than you'd think.
That's a good lesson.
And Jake could easily see the two loudest, most hateful voices on each side of this issue. The huntsmen nowadays had a terrible influence leading them in the current Huntsmaster, who actively fueled hate in his clan and encouraged more and more violent acts against mythics. But on top of that, a cruel figure was gaining traction on the side of the mythics as well. He was simply called the Dark Dragon. He was a being
Oh,
who used
yeah.
black
I
magic
remember
on
now.
himself a millennia ago to extend his life, and had been banished to another dimension for centuries for trying to raise an army to take over the human world and slay or enslave all humans. But now, he was back, and was using the huntsman as a way to fuel more and more mythics into hating all humans.
Oh,
He spread rumors that
that's good.
human governments had created and were funding the huntsman in order to wipe out mythics. Gramps even said he was pretty sure that the Dark Dragon had a member of the Dragon Council in his pocket. The Dragon Council were essentially the highest form of government in the mythic community, and they too had slowly been fueling more and more division between mythics and humans, and it needed to stop if the world was ever going to have peace.
Starting off pretty
Over
well.
his young life, Jake had watched as more and more mythics started becoming hateful towards humans thanks to the Dark Dragon's influence, and he'd always been an odd man out for refusing to partake in hating humans or the Huntsman. He was a bit of an outcast among mythics for his stance, and while
probably
he
among
hid it well,
humans.
it did hurt. He cared more about his people than anyone, but just didn't think that to do that, he had to hate the Huntsman. In spite of the distrust and anger he received from his own people, Jake was determined to show both mythics and the Huntsman that they could all live in peace together, and that neither group had to be wiped out for that peace to come. And the help he'd need to achieve this would
Let's
soon
do this.
find him in the form of a young huntswoman named Rose.
Oh, this is gonna get good. Turning his crush into an ally. Traitor? Ally. Allied traitor. I don't know.
Rose Whitman had started attending Jake's school of Millard Fillmore High a few
Okay, now hold on. Let me move my camera down a little bit. And so, when it comes to at least the Huntsman's outfit, the season 1 appearance, this one, it is very basic. So I do have to say the season 2 appearance of the outfits is far better than the season 1. Season 1 looks like basic ninja. Season 2 at least looks, huntsman. Huntswoman?
2 years after his dragon powers had developed, and while he'd only spoken to her on fleeting occasions, he knew she was a huntswoman because of a tattoo on her arm that all huntsmen wore. He also knew she was one of the kindest...
Wait, tattoo? Huh, I guess that's something he changed, because in the show it's meant to be a birthmark that is like on her hand and spiraling down her arm.
friendliest people in his school, and could tell that it wasn't her faking it. She was a genuinely good person, and that helped solidify Jake's views that the Huntsmen weren't all bad. They just had bad leadership.
Nice.
Jake likely would have pursued her romantically, but the year she came to the school he was already seeing someone, though even he felt that relationship was teetering. Her name was Jasmine, and like Jake, she was a mythic. Her creature form was that of a Nyx, a snake-like creature with wings and a venom-tipped tail who can eat regular food for fuel, but gets a massive, addictive energy boost by sucking the life force from humans. She can do this without killing someone by just taking a bit of life force, but even that leaves the victim incredibly susceptible to illness and feeling very weak for the next few days or more, depending on how much she takes. Jake had been incredibly attracted to Jasmine when they first met, but over the few months they dated, he'd found that more and more she spoke of her resentment towards humans and her hatred of the Huntsman. Jake wasn't really enjoying being with someone so full of anger. Luckily, he'd get an easy out on the night of the first school dance of that year. After stepping away from his date for a few minutes to talk to his human friends, Spud and Trixie, he'd go looking for Jasmine again, and find her sucking the life force out of the school's resident football star, Brad Morton. Jake pulled her away, but then saw her eyes were turning red. He hadn't thought to check, but it was the night of a full moon, which elevated the cravings of a Nyx and increased the high they'd get from drinking life force from humans.
It's always the full moon.
Still, though, she should have been able to control herself. She shoved Jake off her, telling him that it wasn't a big deal. Brad was a jerk, and soon enough the Dark Dragon was going to wipe out all humans anyway. And that was all Jake could take. He told her that they were done, that he couldn't deal with her attitude towards humans and the Huntsman anymore. It was a reasonable excuse to end things, but timing it then and there may not have been the best thing. Furious and ravenous, Jasmine transformed in the middle of the dance and started drinking the life force from everyone. Jake's identity as a dragon was still secret, so he quickly ran off to transform, and to call his grandpa and his Gramps' talking dog assistant, Foo Dog, to come help. By the time Jake was back on the scene, there was already a huntswoman there ready to...
I'm sorry, I may be forgetting, but was there anyone actually able to explain why the heck that dog could talk? Because as far as I remember, there was just a bulldog with John DiMaggio's voice. No explanation. He's just there. Nothing.
To fight,
there we go.
Who he was quite positive was Rose. Before she could attack Jasmine, Jake flew in and tackled his former date away from the student she was drinking. He hurled her into the wall, then turned to the huntswoman and said, "Look, I get why you're here, that you want to protect people, but please, just let me handle this. If you take her out, that's just going to fuel more hate between your people and mine." Her face was largely concealed under a mask, so he couldn't fully read her expression, but the huntswoman just seemed stunned and confused. At the same time, though, she didn't attack, just nodded slightly. Jasmine, upon
What
hearing
to
this
get
though, called Jake a traitor to his people, and that if they had a chance to kill a huntsman, they had to take it. She swung her venom-tipped tail right towards the huntswoman. Jake swooped in front, trying to catch the tail, but still having its end pierce into his chest.
Oh,
He
that's kinda
immediately
hot.
started to feel woozy, as the Nyx's venom is even more potent against dragons than anyone else.
Oh, for
But
crying out
he
loud,
fought
of course
through
it
it.
is.
He flew up and grabbed the banner hanging above the dance hall. He tore it down and used it to wrap up Jasmine, ripping a piece of it off to tie around her mouth to keep her from sucking out any more life force. Though by that point all the humans had fled the dance. By the
Good.
time Jake got her all wrapped up, he was seeing triple of everything, and he passed
Ooh.
out, with the huntswoman walking right towards him.
Alright, by the way, love the redesign. It's actually very good. What is it, like a grass green with a maroon? Red? Oh, next up we're getting Gramps. And we're back with Gramps.
Jake came to, he was at his Gramps' place, along
And
with
again, Season 1 version of his dragon is far better.
his grandpa, Foo Dog, and, surprisingly, Rose. At first, he was shocked that his grandpa had let her see their human identities, but she quickly said she had also already known about Jake's double life. She'd
Whoops.
seen his dragon form flying in and out of school, and pointed out that he had the exact same hairstyle in both forms. Plus, he wore a red jacket constantly that was the same color as his dragon form, so he might as well have been cosplaying as his dragon self every day at school. It
Pretty much.
wasn't hard to figure out. Rose had been moved by Jake's desire to keep her from fueling more hate between their people, and was even more so in seeing that Jake would take a hit from Jasmine's venom to protect a huntswoman. So, when Gramps and Foo Dog showed up on the scene with a power suppressant potion for Jasmine so they could bring her to the Dragon Council for punishment, Rose had wanted to meet with Jake and his family to propose a plan that would pretty instantly make Jake fall head over heels for Rose right then and there. Like Jake, Rose didn't
Teamwork.
think that the current Huntsmaster was good for her people. She did think the Huntsmen were an important clan, as, like Jasmine had shown that night, there were plenty of dangerous mythics that threatened humans, and the dragons couldn't always be trusted to make it onto the scene in time to stop them.
True.
But she also knew her clan needed a more compassionate voice as their lead. She didn't hate mythics and said that most of her friends in the Huntsmen didn't either, but they were being influenced by a very angry man with his own unfortunate history with mythics. She said that her stance was that
Yeah, the
hate is
Huntsmaster.
always just hate. No matter how justified you feel in your hate for any group or person, by holding on to it and acting on it, all you're doing is making the world a more hateful place. Jake had never
You know,
put
I'm surprised he's not called the Hate Master. Bad pun, bad pun.
it that eloquently or clearly himself, but in that moment, he'd never felt more heard. And then Rose started into her plan, and that got him even more pumped. She'd been training in secret to challenge the Huntsmaster, learning everything about his fighting style through fighting alongside him so she could face him for leadership of the group. She felt she was almost ready, but that at the same time the Huntsmaster was taken down, they also needed to snuff out the
All in that one, I'll be right back. And we're back. Let's go.
main source of human-hating ideology on the side of the mythics, the Dark Dragon. Before she could even finish, Jake had
Oh, whoops. Hold on. Forgot one thing. There we go. Let's go.
jumped up and said, "Word, say no more, gorgeous. You take the Hunts Clown down and I'll make the Dark Dragon a thing of the past." Gramps, Rose, and Foo Dog all just paused and stared at him. That was where Rose had been going with her plan, but not that Jake would have to take down the dragon on his own. She said she'd been helping train a team of huntsmen that could go as well as Jake and Gramps in their dragon forms, but
There we
Jake
go.
quickly called no dice on any huntsman helping. Word would travel fast when the Dark Dragon was taken out, and if he were to be killed by huntsmen, that would just fuel even more hate from the mythics, and inevitably some other figure would rise up to take his place, and the cycle would just continue.
He's not
A
wrong.
dragon needed to kill the Dark Dragon. Gramps and Foo Dog quickly told Jake that he was years out from being able to take on the Dark Dragon by himself. Not only had the guy had hundreds of years in solitude to hone his dragon powers, but he'd been enhanced by black magic. Jake asked how long till Rose planned to take out the Huntsmaster,
How long?
and she said the next ceremony in which someone could challenge him for leadership was in 3 months. So Jake said
3 months,
Gramps would just
okay.
have to put him through as much training as possible in that time. Though, with
months
some
isn't too bad.
convincing, Rose and Gramps would talk Jake into getting a bit more help for this fight.
Alright. So who's going to be the second in command for the fight? Who is it?
As much as Jake was determined to take out the
Nope, it's the big bad himself, the Black Dragon.
Dark Dragon,
Oh,
he did a
Dark
fair
Dragon.
share of whining
Whoops.
and complaining about the intensity of training his Gramps was putting him through, though he stifled his moans when Rose was around. She did some training with him, and in the process the two grew closer and closer. It turned out she'd been a bit of an odd one out in the huntsman community too, as she'd refused to badmouth the Mythics the same way Jake had refused to badmouth the huntsmen. The two bonded over their shared goal and morals.
Yes. Oh, it's got to load. We'll give it a moment. And we're back. Let's go.
And Jake came to really appreciate that they were on the same side when he realized how tough of a fighter Rose was. She probably could have taken him out at any point in the last few months if she'd wanted to. On top of
Easily.
training Jake, Gramps was prepping for the fight himself, as well as getting Jake's younger sister Haley as ready as she could be. He'd even help his daughter and Jake's mom, Susan, get back up to speed on using her abilities, which she'd stopped using for the most part after settling down and having kids. Beyond even
I
that,
remember
though,
that.
Jake went out and found some other young dragons he'd met on his first trip to the island of Draco, where the Dragon Council resides. He'd made some friends there, but probably more frenemies. But he knew that
That
not
makes sense.
every dragon had fallen for the Dark Dragon's influence of hate. Jake spoke to a few dragons, trying to subtly get out of them how they felt about the Dark Dragon, and surprisingly, the first one he got on board his plan was an Australian dragon named Fred Nurk. He and Jake hadn't
Really?
exactly gotten along when they first met, and had gotten into a vicious prank war with each other, but Fred expressed a similar displeasure with how much hate was going around the mythic community in the last few years. And so,
he
along
was
with
fighting.
Fred, Jake soon had another 5 dragons willing to help him, and it was great assurance to Jake that, even if they rarely spoke up, there were plenty of other mythics who weren't on board with the hate being leveled towards huntsmen and humans. Soon enough, 3 months had passed, and Rose and Jake were both
Alright,
as ready
here
as
we
they
go.
could be for their plan to commence. They met up before heading off on their separate missions, and with how connected they'd felt over the last few months, Jake thought it was pretty clear they were both into each other, so he tried to kiss her for good luck.
Oh.
But she stopped him. He briefly started to spiral, horrified that he'd totally
Oh,
misread
boy.
how she felt about him, but she quickly told him that wasn't it. She did like him. But she said that finally kissing should be how they celebrate when they both succeeded in their goals.
There
That
you go.
fired Jake up even more, and they both set off. Gramps and Foodog had done some digging to figure out where the Dark Dragon housed up, and it turned out he hid away in a mountain cave on the island of Draco, further
Really?
fueling Gramps' suspicion
Huh.
that a member of the council was
Over by the
working with
council,
him,
Yeah.
which he was quickly proven right about. Thinking they'd arrive quietly to have the element of surprise, Jake and his team were alarmed to find that the Dark Dragon was waiting and ready for them. Along with him was a member of the Dragon Council as suspected, and 3 other dragons.
Oh, damn.
Turned out Jake hadn't been subtle enough when he was trying to get other dragons on his side, and some had figured out his scheme and reported back to the Dark Dragon. Unfortunately, things got even
Well,
worse,
that's
as the
gonna
Dark
happen.
Dragon was able to use his magic to summon a small army of creatures called Shade Demons to fight with him. But Jake was undeterred. The battle commenced, and led by Gramps' instructions, Jake and his team were faring quite
Take 'em
well
down.
given the odds. They targeted the Dark Dragon's allies first to get them out of the way, while Jake kept the Dark Dragon busy. Despite having whined about it, Jake had put in the time and dedication in his training, and while he wasn't laying many hard hits, he was keeping out of the beast's clutches and avoiding being struck himself. Waiting for his
So it seems like he trained a lot more on speed and agility than, raw strength. But that makes sense. And it's better to avoid than be hit.
in with a secret weapon he'd brought. After a half hour of battle, Jake was getting worn out and hadn't gotten his shot, but the Dark Dragon's allies were down for the count, and there were only a few Shade Demons left, meaning it was Jake's whole team against the Big Bad. Even with that many dragons fighting, though, the Dark Dragon was still managing to
Hold on, I'm sorry. I know I just paused and all, but look here at his neck. Like, I can't tell if these purple bits are coming off the neck or if his neck skin is, like, weirdly covering his actual skin. Like, I can't tell.
pick them off.
But I like
Finally,
it.
though, Jake would get his opening. Gramps had gone in for an attack and managed to rip a set of scales off the Dark Dragon's side, opening a small cut in the beast's flesh. It knocked Gramps away just after, then pinned him to the ground with one hand. but Jake darted in, pulled out a small vial, and smashed it right against the dragon's wound, sending a heavy dose of Nick's venom right into its bloodstream. The Dark Dragon was powerful enough to not have the venom knock him out, but it being highly potent against dragons meant he still quickly became woozy and his movement sluggish. This gave the other dragons all the edge that they needed. With one last full-force effort, they finally managed to slay the dragon, who should have died centuries ago. His reign of fueling hatred was over. Jake would then rush off to meet Rose, and would find that she too had been successful, and she was now the huntsmaster of her clan. As promised, they finally kissed, sealing the whole ordeal as the greatest accomplishment of their young lives. Of course, them getting rid of the old Huntsmaster and the Dark Dragon didn't instantly eradicate all hate and division between their people. Trust takes time to rebuild, but with Gramps taking the place of the corrupt council member on the Dragon Council, and Rose being the leading influence for the Huntsmen, slowly over time the divisiveness and animosity between their groups would lessen and lessen, bringing the world of mythics, huntsmen, and humans farther from hate and closer to peace. All because a steadfast member from each of their groups had refused to give in to hate.
Honestly, love it. Dark Dragon design is honestly a little basic, but amazing artwork nonetheless.
If you enjoyed this, I highly recommend
honestly, I probably would have gone with a bit more of a monster-looking dragon, but I digress. I'm not the artist. You are.
Checking out the Artist Reboots Danny Phantom episode, or Artist Reboots Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends episode, or some of the earlier ones taking goofy Marvel and DC characters and rebooting them into the modern day. And like with this episode, if you're really enjoying it, maybe share those episodes, like them, all that good stuff. I'm trying changing around some of the thumbnails to see if that helps get the videos out there a little bit more, but either way, I'm still excited to try some more stuff in this series. And of course, besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is actually just to right now feel into your body and think, is there somewhere that you have tension? Tension that you haven't been acknowledging until just this moment. And now just kind of try and relax everything. Maybe take a nice deep breath in through your nose. And just let out a big sigh. I know that's a bit of a different one than usual, but hopefully it just kind of helps you relax a little bit more right here in this moment. I hope that was helpful. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday, where I'm going to be doing some not-so-weird Marvel and DC fusions. I'll see you there. Goodbye.
Well, everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, so remember to support the original creator and all they do, and I'll see you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.